I get ready, because this deep dive, well, it takes us right to the heart of hip-hop history. Like one of the biggest mysteries, the murders of Tupac and Biggie.
Yeah.
You guys sent us a ton of stuff to go through, really focusing on, like, Diddy and, like, what his role was in all of this. We've got court documents and, this YouTube breakdown from Law and Crime Network, and even pieces of Keffe D's book.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? Because we're not just dealing with these unsolved cases, cold cases. We're really like peeling back these layers of like this story that mixes music and power and, like some pretty serious rivalries. It's intense.
It really is. It's not just about who shot who.
Right.
Like, it's about understanding what was going on in the 90s rap scene. East Coast, West Coast. Bad Boy versus Death Row. Like Biggie, Tupac, Suge Knight, Diddy, all these huge, huge names. And they're all, like, clashing.
Yeah. And it was like a really volatile time. This wasn't just people like going back and forth with diss tracks. We're talking threats. We're talking violence. There was a real sense of fear around these groups,
Absolutely. So let's go back, like, rewind to 1996. Tupac's in Vegas. He's there for the Mike Tyson fight.
Right.
And he gets into this fight with Orlando Anderson at the MGM Grand, supposedly over a chain, like a stolen chain.
Right.
So later that night, Tupac's riding with Suge Knight, and bam, shots fired from a white Cadillac.
Oh, wow.
Tupac's hit multiple times, and 6 days later, he's gone.
And that's the fight with Anderson. That seems to be like the big turning point. It brings in this guy, this figure who becomes super important in like the whole Tupac story. Dwayne Keith Davis, or as most people know him, Keffe D.
Right, Keffe D. Yeah, he's been kind of this like mysterious figure in all this, At first he denied he had anything to do with it. Then he's like, okay, I was in the car, but I didn't shoot. And then like years later he comes out and says, no, my nephew, Orlando Anderson, he's the one who pulled the trigger. But get this. He says Diddy was the one behind it all.
Yeah, and what's so interesting is how his story has changed over time. In his book and some interviews, he actually says Diddy offered him $1 million to take out both Tupac and Suge Knight.
Wow.
So, like, is he just trying to shift the blame, or could there actually be some truth to what he's saying? It's really hard to know.
That's the question, isn't it? Especially now because, well, Keffe D was recently arrested,
Yeah.
near Vegas, charged with Tupac's murder. So it seems like his whole legal strategy now is to just throw Diddy under the bus hard. He's even talking about conversations he says he had with Diddy back in 2008, claiming Diddy wanted both of them, Tupac and Knight, dead.
Bold move. Especially when you think about the prosecution. They're poking holes in his whole story, right? They're saying there's no proof of any, like, immunity deal to protect him, and they keep pointing out how many times his story has changed over the years.
So what do we think? Is this guy a reliable source?
Mm-hmm.
Or is he just trying to save himself? It really makes you think about how much weight we should give to someone's words, especially when they've, changed their story so many times.
It raises some big questions about, like, how reliable a witness is, especially when we're trying to reconstruct something that happened so long ago. We have to ask ourselves, what are his motivations? Is this revenge? Is he hoping for a lighter sentence? Or does he really just want to, like, set the record straight? It's a lot to consider.
And then there's the other big unsolved murder in this whole saga, Biggie Smalls, shot and killed in L.A. just, 6 months after Tupac?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Another huge loss, and the case is still open. And that just adds fuel to all those conspiracy theories,
Yeah, and what's interesting here is that we're hearing similar claims about Diddy. This time, it's coming from his former bodyguard, Eugene Deal. Deal says that Diddy was acting weird, like in the week leading up to Biggie's death. Anxious, pushing to go to this party, even though there were security concerns. It's almost like he had this bad feeling about something.
Man, that's chilling. Like, Deal could sense something was off, like something bad was going to happen. And now he's straight up saying he thinks Diddy had something to do with Biggie's murder, too.
It's definitely, like, compelling. But without hard evidence, it's really tough to say how much weight these claims hold. Do they stand up in court? And how do investigators even begin to unravel something like this after all this time?
It's like trying to solve a puzzle where you're missing half the pieces. You can see some patterns, but it's so hard to know for sure what the full picture really is.
Makes you wonder, right? Like, will we ever really know the whole story? And, like, this is already so complicated. But then Diddy gets himself into even more trouble, and this time it has nothing to do with Tupac or Biggie.
It's crazy, right? 2025 hits, and boom, he's slapped with these federal charges. Racketeering, sex trafficking, prostitution. And the details are, well, pretty wild.
The whole thing centers around these, Diddy called them freak-offs, basically these massive sex parties that he like organized, and he often filmed them too. And the prosecution, they're saying that he used his power, his influence to pressure women into taking part, sometimes even bringing in like professional sex work.
So we're not talking about like just some casual get-together here. That sounds like a whole system, like a network almost, something set up to like take advantage of and control these women. And the fact that he was filming everything, that just makes it even more messed up.
It does, and it brings up all these questions about consent, power dynamics. How does the legal system even handle something like this? Diddy's lawyers, they're arguing that the videos, yeah, they're explicit, but they show that everyone was there willingly. They're pointing to specific moments in the footage. And, they're also questioning if it's even legal to use this kind of stuff as evidence.
So basically they're saying, hey, what happens behind closed doors is private. These videos shouldn't be used against him. It's a tough argument to make, especially with charges this serious.
It is. It really makes you think about privacy rights and how they clash with criminal investigations, especially in this day and age, Like, where's the line between personal freedom and holding people responsible for stuff that could be harmful?
It really does. And it makes you think about the bigger picture, too, The balance of power, conflicting stories, and just how hard it is to figure out the truth, especially when you're dealing with people in the public eye.
You're absolutely right. This whole thing, from the rap feud to the unsolved murders and now these sex trafficking charges, it all points to how complicated truth and justice can be. It's like a reminder that things are rarely black and white.
It also makes you think about fame and fortune. Does it make you feel untouchable, or does it make you more of a target?
It's a good question, and it seems like Diddy's legal problems aren't going away anytime soon. The deeper we go into these allegations, the harder it is to separate the public face from the private person.
Yeah, it's almost like we're watching this real-life drama unfold. Every new development adds another layer of mystery and makes everything more complicated. I mean, it's a story that just keeps you guessing, doesn't it? And, after going through all this stuff, all these sources, there are just so many questions that are still unanswered about Diddy, Tupac, Biggie. Like, with Keffe D getting arrested, does that actually get us any closer to solving Tupac's murder? Or does it just make things, even more confusing?
Yeah, it's really hard to say. I mean, on the one hand, what he says could be really important. Like, it could help us understand what happened leading up to Tupac's death. But then on the other hand, he's changed his story so many times, and who knows why he's pointing the finger at Diddy, right? So it makes you wonder how much we can really trust him.
Yeah, guys, it makes you think about how hard it is to, like, piece together the truth
Yeah.
when you've got all these different people saying different things, especially after so much time has gone by. People forget. Stories change. It's tough to separate what really happened from what people, think happened.
For sure. And you throw in all the media attention, all the pressure to solve these big cases, and it gets even harder to figure out the truth.
Right. And then there's Diddy and all his legal problems. Will he ever be able to clear his name when it comes to Tupac and Biggie? And what about all these new charges? It feels like he's just got problem after problem piling up.
Yeah, no doubt. His lawyers, they've got their work cut out for them. They've got to deal with all this stuff from the past and now all these new accusations. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out, how the courts decide what to do with all this evidence, what his fate's going to be.
This whole deep dive has been crazy, right? We've uncovered all these accusations, all these different versions of the story, and so many things are still a mystery. It really shows you that finding the truth can be a long and complicated process.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just don't get all the answers.
Yeah, absolutely. What's been the most surprising thing for you going through all this? Like, what really made you think?
I think for me, it's realizing how much perspective matters. We've seen the same events described in totally different ways, depending on who's talking. It makes you realize that truth can be slippery, and sometimes we might never have all the pieces to understand what really went down.
That's such a good point. It reminds us that we need to be careful to question what we hear and to look at things from different angles before we make up our minds. These cases, even after all this time, they still fascinate us, and they make us think about these big questions like, what is justice? How reliable is memory? And how do we make sense of the past? Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. It's been quite a journey.
Absolutely. And thanks to all of you for sending us this stuff and for listening. Keep those questions coming.